Those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen, Boswarva, normally based on the west coast of Scotland, near Oban. But yeah, at the minute I'm currently up in Orkney having my holidays. So like say just doing some diving and adventuring around the island and that. So what I thought I would talk to you tonight about is citizen science. It's a real passion of mine. I am a marine scientist in my day job, but I also began on this road to science. I used to be a dental nurse. So way before I was a diver, way before I was in marine science and marine conservation, I was a dental nurse doing a lot of citizen science projects in my spare time. And it was kind of like that passion that kind of fueled me, spurred me on to kind of realize that actually the nursing wasn't for me and I needed to actually get out there and experience it for myself and for like all the time kind of thing. So it's just, I think that's one of the big key things here is that when we talk about citizen science, we're not talking about people who are the experts in the field here. We're talking about anyone can get involved in science projects and make a difference. Yeah, so this is me. So I've been part of BSAC now for the last 11 years. I'm a dive leader, open water instructor. I'm also, for those of you that are based in Scotland, I'm the local organiser for BSAC South Scotland regional training events, and I'm also their marine environment specialist. So you may have heard my name kind of come up in various different roles throughout BSAC. But I'm also on another head, not part of my day job. I'm also one of the Seasearch Scotland coordinators. So can't talk about citizen science without bringing Seasearch into it at some point. And I'm sure most of you will have heard of Seasearch. So I won't talk too much about it, but we will bring Seasearch into that and like the big role that we have in collecting data through citizen science. And like I said, before, I am a huge fan of citizen science, and I've been doing it for a long time, not just marine, terrestrial, not just UK based, but all over the world. There's so many projects out there that you can get involved in, and you don't even have to leave the comfort of your house. There's plenty of things out there. But what I thought I would do is kind of hone in onto some of the many citizens. I mean, it's going to be a struggle to mention everything that's going on even in Scotland, so I apologise if there's people on here who are involved in different projects that I just don't have the ability to talk about. I'll try at the end to kind of summarise some of the ones that I don't go into, but again, there's just so much going on out there. It's just a case of kind of doing some Googling and looking around and seeing what kind of things that you're into. So yeah, so that's me. That was me in the summer. I was doing a bit of wildlife guiding, and I hit the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust shop just before I got on the boat. So you can see me like fully clad out, ready to see some whales and dolphins there. And then the bottom picture on the left there is a bit of egg case collecting that I do for the Shark Trust. And my mum, whenever I go and visit her, she actually has a beach there that seems to have the most number of thornback skate egg cases on it, and every time I go I can collect hundreds. So whenever I come home, she's fully prepared for me getting the bucket out and cleaning everything off and being out in the garden counting and things. So that's kind of a typical thing that happens when I head home to my parents. So what I take citizen science to be, and this is only kind of like some of the ideas around it, there's lots of avenues to citizen science. So this is citizens, this is everyday people coming together and kind of working on data that's helping to answer big questions or little questions, but essentially it's a way of getting non-experts involved in science, in research, and doing things that interest them. You can see a lot of citizen science going about on social media. You're going out, you may be collecting data, you may be just analysing data, you might be submitting pictures of things that you see. There's a lot of app-based ways in which if you go out and see something and your phone automatically records where you are, you can then upload that onto somewhere, and we'll go into some of those in more detail. But citizen science is also a great way of kind of expanding knowledge, talking to people who might not be the expert in that field, but they have relevant knowledge of things that kind of can help a project, and might even people think of things differently to what they would, because you're coming in with a different expertise, a different knowledge base, and from a different background. So it's all worth kind of having this kind of like collective pool of people that can go out there and help answer all these questions. So why is that important? Well, essentially, you can go out and collect a lot of data, and it can take quite a long time to firstly go through that data and work out what is important, what the big questions are, how you're going to answer those questions, because you just have all this information. So if you can find ways in which you can give this information out to different groups of people in order for them to help you get to that final answer, you can then get to that answer quicker and start to make changes. So these can be anything from these small scale projects where you might just want to get a community involved in something, to then these big projects where you need lots of people helping out from all over the world. And there's web-based platforms called Zoo Universe, and you can pretty much get involved in absolutely any project you want, citizen science-wise. You can sit there and analyze through different types of data, and ultimately that will get checked through. Multiple people will look through the same data, so that it's kind of like statistically robust way of analyzing and then coming up with the answers that's then fed back to the experts, and then they then take that information and use it to then put towards the bigger questions. But that's just one side of it. It's also that, I mean, the amount of time that goes into that, if you can bring in lots and lots and lots of volunteers from all over the place, you're going to speed up the amount of time it takes to analyze and then be able to go out and answer that. And if it's something for marine management or marine conservation where you want answers quite quickly, that's a really important thing, because you don't want to, you don't want to collect all this really amazing data and then it take like, a couple of years, 5-10 years, say, to actually get to an answer, when you want to like look at making changes quite soon. And there's also a big monetary, if you were to go out and kind of pay people to conduct these surveys, pay people to go out and do this, that you just wouldn't be able to kind of fund the types of projects that are being done. So a lot of citizen science relies on volunteers volunteering their time and their effort into these projects. So it really is about having a greater good and being able to be part of something that's going to be really important for something in particular. And like I approached on with the other last slide, we've all got our own personal interests and our expertise. We might not understand the main process of what's going on, but we might be interested in certain aspects of that, and that's where we can help through being citizen scientists to kind of go and kind of feel like we're making a difference, and we can feed into these big projects that are going on. And there's lots of other benefits as well, like not just benefits to the project themselves. The reason they have citizen scientists is to help them kind of get this data going, but also there's many benefits to the people who are out there conducting that as the citizen scientist. You could be getting involved actually physically on the ground. You could be getting involved in a group, volunteering. You might have a particular skill that's quite useful. Like, you could be the person driving the boat, say, on a project, and then you go out and you're helping, you're meeting people, and it's getting you outside. You could be meeting, more people. You might be talking to people over Zoom, having meetings and things that you wouldn't normally get to. So it's actually really good for mental health and well-being. Getting people out and getting people involved and getting people talking. So some of these projects that go on, they really help connect communities together, because there could be a citizen science project going on in your town, and you might meet people in that town that you've never met before, and you wouldn't have done if you hadn't been working on these projects together. And also, if there's like-minded people in other towns throughout the country, it's also a way of building a network of people of similar interests and of similar interests and likes and wanting to actually go out and even build something bigger of this. So it gives you a real sense of support and community and place, and kind of helps you feel that you're doing something good and putting something back into your local area, or into however you feel you're doing something locally, like actually being able to see the difference that makes when you step out your front doorstep and know that you've had a part in that. So it can be really important. And also it just to feel that you're, I mean, this is one of the things for me, it's like feeling like I'm leaving the world in a better place than how I found it, by helping out, by building knowledge, by finding out something new, and by helping in these projects. Everything you're doing is helping towards something bigger. You're like the building block towards that in a way. So, like I say, getting wet in marine-based citizen science is completely optional. We're British-Sub-Aqua Club. We're a community of divers, but we also are building up more of a community, of a snorkeling community. We have friends, we have family who may not be snorkelers or divers, and citizen science is a real great way of kind of bringing people together that might not normally do things. So, you know, you've got trainees that can't go diving yet. You can build trainees and build citizen science into your club, for example, doing things that you might not even need divers for. It could be shore-based or computer-based, for example. So there's lots of different things out there that you can do. So for the next slide, I'm basically just going to go through kind of quite a, like I say, I can't go through every single citizen science project that's going on in Scotland. There's just so much stuff going on, and I really do apologise if there's things that I don't cover. But I was, yeah, there's that risk of falling into a rabbit hole and talking too little about so many things. So I thought I'd just pull out some of the big projects and some of the smaller projects that are going on, and also things that I think people can relate to and kind of get involved in more, because you know, that's kind of what we need, is to like kind of build up these core groups of people that can go out there and help on these things. So I'm going to start with Seasearch. Like I say, I'm one of the Seasearch coordinators for Scotland. So my role is to assist the other coordinators in the running of Seasearch within Scotland. We do a lot of diving, a lot of training, and collecting data, and helping our trainee and our observers and our surveyors go out and collect data, and then we collect all this information in and make sure that it goes to the right people and that this information can be updated. So what is Seasearch? I mean, most people do know what Seasearch is these days, particularly if you come from a BSAC background. But just for those, just in case there's people here that don't, Seasearch is a UK-wide, it was historically a diving recording scheme for volunteers to go out and collect data on seabed habitats and species throughout the coastline of the UK and build an understanding of what we have around our coast. That has since been adapted, especially over lockdown, to incorporate more snorkeling and snorkelers into that. And we've adapted the course, we've adapted our forms in order to be able to encompass snorkelers and also beachcombers. Because what divers are great at doing is going in and going deep into your dive and getting really interested in a particular habitat down there. But what you miss out in that key information is the bit where the diver's getting in and out. So you've got your bit that your snorkelers can really tackle, which, you know, is kind of like your top 2 meters, and also kind of like the intertidal section, which can also be covered by beachcombers. So you're getting information then that's multi-layered and not just from the depths, but also capturing things that are going on around our coastline. And something else that's fed into that recently is there's along with Nature Scot, is that they have produced, Nature Scot is the Scotland kind of regulatory authority for conservation and management of the marine and the land environment. They kind of feed into Marine Scotland and give guidance on management. And what they're trying to do is get community groups involved with marine science. And there's a lot of community groups around Scotland that are looking at their local area and wanting to improve it, or wanting to see good management and conservation of the habitats and the species that are within it. So what Nature Scot have created is a handbook of how to go out and conduct science. So how to do drop cameras, how to go out and do surveys from the shoreline. So getting people from not just divers involved, but community groups, kids, adults, families, everyone in the community able to help monitor their local environment. And Seasearch feeds into that by being able to teach that kind of how to conduct the in-water, that actually physically putting people in the water and surveying down there. And what all this data then goes into is kind of, when we're producing Seasearch data, you're writing information on these forms that is then quality assured. It's checked multiple times by various people within Seasearch, and then that data then gets input into the system each year and becomes freely available. So it means that we have collected over all these years these vast amounts of information, which can have a big impact. It can fill gaps in knowledge. We can record long-term changes, short-term changes, and see what's happening to our marine habitats and species. So Seasearch in general has now over 30 years worth of data, and like I say, these sightings are updated yearly, end of each year. So when you start, if you are a Seasearcher, I apologise, because you'll start getting badgered by your local coordinators asking you to make sure you submit all your forms by the end of the year, and that's because there's people busily working away to update and input that data into this big database so that then it's available for use. And this information is freely available for anyone to use. It's called it all goes into this database called the National Biodiversity Network, and the network, I've put up a slide that shows the network in Scotland, but there is a National Biodiversity Network for the whole of the UK, and then there's this offshoot of Scotland one. And what's great about it is that you can search for a particular species, you can search for a particular habitat, you can even search for a particular area. I've put in Loch, and I picked crustaceans. So this is every record that someone has entered, not just of Seasearch, but so I should say other organisations feed into this National Biodiversity Network, but Seasearch is one of the main contributors to this. This is where all of our data goes. So what you can see here is over the years, even just in this one particular area of the Loch, there's been 49 crustacean sightings. So then you can go in and filter them through species, and you can learn more about what, you might be doing a dive somewhere. You can actually go in and see what kind of animals, what kind of habitat's going to be there before you go in, and you can get an idea of what you're going to see when you're in there. But it's also really good that when you submit data, you can actually see your records in there as well. So you can have a look through and see your name next to something. So in particular, if you've spotted something rare and interesting somewhere, and you've put that form in, and it's all been verified, your name's going to pop up and say, hey, Karen Boswarva found this nudibranch in this particular place. That's quite nice, because then that gives you a sense of, well, you fed into that project, you fed into understanding, and then hopefully someone's going to come along and need to use that data at some point, which gives then that greater, wider expanse and gives it some purpose to what you're doing in there. And Seasearch data really does make a difference. One case study in particular is the Loch Marine Protected Area, what is now the Loch Marine Protected Area. It was designated in 2019, and it covers quite a large area of, it's the largest known flame shell reef in the world. Now, flame shells are these beautiful, absolutely stunning mollusks, bivalves, and they have these protruding, the picture I've got, apologies, it's my own, it's not the most flamboyant one. This is actually a really weird pale individual. And if you see pictures of them, they've not been saturated. They are genuinely these bright orange tentacles coming out of them. They're absolutely stunning. But you don't typically see them above the surface that often. They're typically underneath, where they form these dense nests made out of these byssal threads, these kind of sticky threads that they use to kind of bind together, and you get these large communities of them. And when they do that, when they create these nests, what they're effectively doing is they're binding sediment together, creating a new habitat. And this then becomes really key, important seabed for other animals, which you wouldn't get in areas where the flame shells aren't, because they're then attracted to the substrate that the flame shells have produced. So when there was an incident of a trawler going into Loch, and was spotted by some sea searchers. They immediately went in after the trawler had gone and assessed the damage that had been caused by this trawler and this dredger. So they actually recorded the full extent of the damage to this reef that was caused by this dredging activity, almost like immediately afterwards. And I think it's been one of the fastest emergency designations of a marine protected area by government, because the evidence was right there. There was no denying the fact that there's been vast damage caused to a very important species. So then all that Seasearch data and then additional data that went in, so they basically went in immediately after, and then continuously on after that to look at how the seabed improved over time. And what that meant was that information, that evidence, could be used to directly support that management and that conservation of that really key marine habitat and the species. And you're not, when you protect one species, you're not just doing that, you're protecting the whole habitat of other animals there, and improving and maintaining that and restoring that seabed, hopefully back to a level that it was at before it got dredged. And now we've got this huge, 23-kilometre square area, which not only covers flame shells, but there's also Mammal beds in there. It's really important seabed there. And the fact that that data could immediately get put to use is just one benefit of actually going out and being part of Seasearch, and actually being able to. The method that we use to complete the forms is a standardized process that is used by government organizations, so that the forms themselves are quality assured and suitable for management decisions, which is, it's great that information can come from volunteer divers, essentially. So that's my bit on Seasearch. There's also, I could carry on, but we're not in a Seasearch course, we're in a citizen science talk. So I'm going to start talking now about a range of other projects that you can get involved in. If not just if you live in Scotland, if you're visiting Scotland, then great, you can also do these here, but most of these are actually also nationwide things that you can get involved in as well. So I'm going to try and start big and work smaller. So I'm going to talk about, again, carry on with habitats here. So looking at seagrass beds. Now, seagrass is really important. You might start to hear more and more about it in the news. Lots of different projects going on globally. Essentially, it's a key habitat. It's really important as a nursery ground. Particularly in Scotland, a lot of commercially important species are found in here in juvenile form. But in the south and in England, seagrass beds are really important as well for seahorses. And in other places, they're important for seahorses as well. And they're also found there's been new research recently about this different species of seagrass that can find plastics. They have, so there are only flowering true plants, and they grow roots into the sand, into the sediment, and that stabilizes the sand and the sediment and acts as barriers. So when we talk about ecosystem engineers, is big buzzwords that keep being thrown around these days. These are ways in which the ecosystem is engineering the environment to protect us. So from storms, if you can stabilize sediments, it minimizes not the need for like protective structures, man-made structures, but if you have the habitat in place, much like you might have heard, it's more commonly associated with mangroves, buffer the impact of storms. So these different habitats like kelp and seagrass, they actually stabilize the sediments and buffer us from the impact of things like storm events. So there's lots of benefits to protecting and restoring historical beds throughout the UK. And one of the big things is unless we go out there and find it, we don't actually know where it is. So you need lots of eyes on the ground, random, accounts. You just happen to come across some seagrass. Oh, how do I record that? Well, fortunately, the Seagrass project, Seagrass Spotter, has both an app and a website in which you can, if you're on a walk or you spot some seagrass, you can actually upload your pictures, upload information of where you've seen it, and then they get an account of it, and then that can actually feed directly in, and they can get people on the ground to actually go in and conduct full on, you get aerial surveys that will look for the coverage of it. You can get other people coming in, and what happens is that information can get then filtered through. And if there's any development projects happening anywhere, for example, then developers may check then, well, has any protected have any seagrass been there? Okay, we need to check, make sure that's there, and not just build something on there not knowing. There's a big push now. The big environmental impact assessments are part of all planning and development, even the marine environment. So having this base knowledge will also benefit when you're looking at developments and making sure that places are suitably protected from any development that is meant to occur on it. So again, you don't have to be a diver to see seagrass. I've got 2 example pictures there, both which I've taken. Top one actually was in Orkney, just off over in Westray. I just happened to be on the beach. I was having a little walk, and I came across these little stalks of seagrass. They're very high up on the beach. Wasn't expecting to see them, but a quick picture and a, uploaded onto the app later that day. So that was just a chance walk on a beach. Whereas the other one was a very clear bed that there is in Oban Bay that I dive quite a bit, and it's quite an extensive one. And at high water you can actually have a really nice long dive on it. But in some of these places you don't have to be a diver. You could be up on you could be a supper, you could be a kayaker, you could just take your mask with you and just like drop your head in and see what you're seeing as you go along. You could be walking along the beach. There's 2 main species. There's essentially 3 species, but one's still contested, so we'll just talk about 2, because one species is typically intertidal, so it has to be uncovered at certain points of the tide in order for it to survive, whereas the other species is completely subtidal. So it's 2 different species. They both need different conditions to live by. So where you don't need to know which species it is you're going in there, as long as you can identify that is a seagrass. And what a lot of these apps and websites do is they highlight to you a little key that will show you how you can differentiate between, is it a seagrass or something else. And then obviously if you take your picture anyway, and then they'll confirm whether or not that is or not for you. So yeah, anyone can, absolutely anyone can get involved in this. You don't have to have your kit on. You just have to be going for a walk down the beach to spot anything. I was down by the marina yesterday and spotted some seagrass that had washed up on the tide line, took a picture. Because even incidental records like that, there must be a seagrass bed somewhere in the vicinity for it to have been washed up. But it's quite interesting to see it there, where I wouldn't expect to see it. So it's just keeping your eyes peeled as you're out walking and things, just to see what you might find on the strand line. And what's also really important when we're talking about what we see is also what we don't see. If you go to a beach and spot nothing, that's still effort that you've put in to looking for things. So it means that if you feed that information and people can actually see you're going there, you might not be seeing anything, but actually it's not a beach that's not being looked at. It's just that there's just perhaps not whatever they're looking for in particular isn't actually found in that area. So sometimes no records is also good data that you need to record. So moving on to another habitat maker is the European oyster, also called the native oyster, Oyster Beds. There's an awful lot of projects going on again around the UK, but also lots around Scotland as well. Why we want to look at oysters? Big habitat. They increase biodiversity. Similar to seagrass, you get species there that you wouldn't have if they weren't there. Like I was saying about the flame shells, they provide a substrate for other animals to enable them to attach onto. So oyster shells are hard, so essentially they'll be creating a rocky surface that other animals can then settle on. They're also beneficial to the marine environment because they filter seawater. So that's also something that, you know, could be, if we have less oysters, maybe we've got a less clean system. They're also ecosystem engineers. They obviously create habitat. They buffer us from, you know, protect our shores from harmful impacts. They are potential carbon stores. There's a lot of research going on at the moment looking at how oysters over time form beds that are essentially building. So if you imagine, like, if you've got, you know, 100 years ago, you've got an oyster bed, and then you've got new oysters growing on top, and then you've got sediment falling in between. Essentially what you're doing is you're potentially locking carbon under the seabed in a form of the actual oyster shells themselves. So you've got potential carbon store there. And historically, throughout Scotland, there were these vast beds. I mean, the fact that places are actually, you know, named after oysters and things, and if you look into historical records, like particularly in, I think, Edinburgh, they used to use it within the cement that forms part of the walls of the city. Like, you know, everybody ate them. The shells would just mound up everywhere in like 1800s. But because of this overfishing and because of disease and pollution and habitat loss, the population has really declined. So there's a big push at the minute as well to, like, kind of find, not only restore oysters, but in order to restore them, you have to kind of have an idea of this historical, what's the word that I'm looking for? You're looking for, like, these historical populations, because you're more likely to have an effective restoration project if you're restoring into areas where it's suitable for them, because there's a reason why the beds are there. If you can build on those historical beds, if you can reintroduce and improve them, then you're going to have a beneficial, hopefully, increase in restoration success. So there's lots of oyster projects, people seeding and hatchery projects going on about this. One of the ways in which BSAC is this is one of the biggest projects that BSAC has got involved in recently. It's actually a nationwide environmental project, and it's in collaboration with the Zoological Society of London, the University of Plymouth, and Blue Marine Foundation. And the idea is to have this long-term oyster restoration project, and, like, the first aspect of that is identifying where these historical reefs are. So you can actually go online to the BSAC website, and you'll see you can record. There's a form and tells you how to do it, and it also there's a lot of really good information there on what to look for in a native oyster and a European oyster, and also kind of some of the similar species that can get confused with it, so that you can go out there and see if you're seeing the right things or not. But you can also, like, take pictures. You don't have to be a diver. Most oysters are found in the intertidal, so it's found a lot more by snorkelers, kayakers going out, taking a mass with them, having a look as you go along the coastline. But even beach walkers, if you're on a really low spring tide, then could be areas uncovered there that you wouldn't normally see, and then you might find that there's populations of oysters down there as well. Seasearch is also collecting information on oysters, which is helping to build into big restoration projects that are going on around the UK. So it's one of those that, don't forget, if you're submitting to one, just check that if you're involved in multiple projects, don't forget, whilst everyone is trying to feed the information back to each other, and projects try and work together on these things, sometimes you do have to just fill out multiple forms to make sure that the data is going to the right place. So don't neglect one for the other, just in case there was like double up and add it onto a different form. See anything, but all the information on, I've tried to give as many websites as possible, and so these slides will be available as well. And obviously this is recorded, so you'll be able to go back and look at what these are. So moving on from habitats, I thought I'd talk about some big key species groupings. So Sharks, skates, are all part of a group called the elasmobranchs. You might have heard most things called rays. I'm going to try and steer clear of calling things rays. So although we hear of thornback rays and things, the difference between rays and skates is that skates, we tend to have skates around Scottish, around UK waters. Skates lay eggs and rays don't. We do get stingrays, which is a true ray, but most rays that we have that we're typically called rays are actually skates. So I'm trying to stick to the skate sharks and skates, which will make more sense when we start looking at citizen science. So why do we want to conserve sharks and skates? Why do we want to do citizen science on them? So basically, all species globally are under threat. There's multiple stressors out there. We're hearing so much in the news today of things that are going on globally. It's not just impacting us, it's impacting, terrestrial wildlife, it's impacting the marine environment, it's impacting everything. And when you add those environmental stresses on top of fisheries pressures and all sorts of other things that are going on, it leads to a very, a lot of issues that can go on for these species that you're not quite sure how they're going to react in a changing world that's changing so rapidly. Now, elasmobranchs in particular, they're long-lived, they're slow to mature, they don't have a lot of young. It can take them quite a number of years until they're able to reproduce. So, there's even getting a shark or a skate to the stage where it is able to reproduce. We've got to make sure that we're protecting and conserving the life stages that enable it to get to that point. And a lot of sharks and skates in UK and Scottish waters are migratory, and they'll use different habitats and they'll move to different areas within these various life stages. So they are typically very difficult to manage, very difficult to protect. And there's over 60 now that have been species of shark and skates that are identified as either resident or migratory in Scottish waters. But relatively little is actually known about these movements and what they do. So however we can feed into that and feed into information as citizen scientists is really going to be helpful to the shark scientists that are out there kind of trying to piece together what these sharks and what these skates are doing. So again, there's loads of ways in which we can get involved. Divers can be collecting records of seeing them underwater, snorkelers as well. Some of these are found very, very shallow. Beach walkers, we'll go into more detail how beach walkers can be beneficial to shark researchers, and also families, and also sea anglers. There's lots, this is multi-level kind of people who can go out there and help and collect data and think about how we can all work together to kind of help conserve and protect and find out more information about these animals. Because that's the key thing. How we need to know all this information so we can work out how best to protect them, how best to conserve them, and make sure that the suitable habitats are available for them, and that we're not putting any further pressures or worse pressures on them than what we effectively need to. So, starting big, there's Shark Trust, who you might have already heard of. They are kind of the UK charity organisation that are out there doing a lot of good for lobbying for sharks and skates and rays in the UK. They have a fantastic citizen science project called the Great Egg Case Hunt. Now, sharks and skates have different ways in which they, elasmobranchs have ways in which they give birth. You can have live young, or you have many that have egg cases, and these egg cases have the live. So basically, they'll lay this egg, and it will grow over time, and then the little shark or the little skate will pop out at the right time. So they have created lots and lots of guidance on people, divers, snorkelers, beach walkers, to go out and actually find evidence of these egg cases. Because what happens is once that shark or skate has hatched and gone into the environment, the egg case is left behind, and it'll either been attached to something or it'll be lying on the seabed. And then once the animal's gone from it, essentially it will become buoyant, it will float to the surface, and it will gradually come to shore when we can pick it up on a beach. So we can go beach walking, we can look for these egg cases. And although it's not a great indicator of where an animal has come from, because tide and waves and current play a big part in where these egg cases wash up. However, what it does do is it gives an idea of how many new recruits are going into that community, how well the animal is doing around our waters. So if you identify each hatched egg case as a new animal, and you can get an idea of populations, which helps people identify kind of how animals are doing. So, like I say, this is a UK-wide project, but you can do this anywhere. And what's great is they've got a really good app that you can go through. They've got all the ID guides are fantastic and really help you kind of work out what animal you see, and they tell you how to best clean it, how to take the best picture of it. And it's been going now since 2003, and they've got over, 30,000 records of egg cases throughout the UK waters. And what's great is you can actually go online and look at the map and see where these are all distributed yourself. And if you've got the app, you can actually go into your area, and everything that you have submitted, you can see in a map, and you can see what you've been, where you've submitted from and how many and that. So it's quite nice. And then it's also, they've got a really good way of feeding back to you as well. So if you've seen something interesting, they'll definitely get in touch with you and say, oh, can you just provide some more information on that, for example? Are you sure that's what you've seen? So it's like, you're not just feeding something and not learning anything back off them. They will actually contact you if they need to. So it's really, really useful, really, really beneficial, and it really helps them get an idea, and anyone who wants to access this database, an idea of what sharks and skates are doing in our waters. Now, going more Scotland focused, I'm in Orkney now. I thought, well, perfect. There's the Orkney Skate Trust up here. So skate being the flapper skate and the blue skate, which if you are on their Facebook page, you'll see that they've got video footage showing both these species, which is fantastic. So the Orkney Skate Trust looks at recording flapper skate egg cases that are washed up on beaches, underwater, any records as well of live egg cases or of live skate. And they take that information. You can go on their website, you can upload information onto there. There's also a place for recreational anglers to go and submit any data that they have from any sightings that they have from going out and angling. So this is a web-based recording. So if you've gone out and you see something, you can then come back and you can add that information in there. You can add it into there and into the Shark Trust. But this is kind of like a community-fed organisation for information on restoring, protecting, conserving flapper skate within Orkney waters. Flapper skate so I should say that although we've got all these species of skates and sharks in UK waters, it's very difficult to go out there and conduct research on them. We actually have this one species, the critically endangered flapper skate, which has a lot of management and a lot of protections for it, and there's a lot of work being done, which is why there's a lot of citizen science projects going on for it from a lot of different places throughout Scotland. So historically, this animal is found on the west, all over Scotland, all over the UK waters. But they're amazing species. They're like one of the biggest skates in the world, and because of their sheer size and because of fishing pressures in the past, they were actually reduced to very small pocket areas and having only strongholds now in the west coast of Scotland and in north coast and Orkney Islands, being seen as key areas for them. So there's a lot of research going on about their movements and how they use their habitat and how often they're in those areas. So there's, like I said, there's a lot of different citizen science projects all feeding in to this main hub to try and find out more information on these amazing creatures. So there's this app there will be an app. This is a website-based recording scheme that is based on essentially sea angler data, in order to collect information on the spot patterns. So when you're doing, there's many ways in which you can kind of like do photo identification. It's more commonly known on dolphins, on whales and dolphins, which we'll go into in a bit. But also, it's been identified not that long ago that you can actually, each of these skates has their own individual spot pattern. And so researchers have worked at the Scottish Association of Marine Science in Oban and University of St Andrews, worked with Nature Scot to produce this website in order for anglers to submit data of the animals, to be able to try and match up to see how often, where these animals are being brought up to the surface from, so they can get an idea of their movement and where they're being found within these areas. So this is a really, really good tool that is providing additional information on the movement of these creatures. So there's, if anyone on here is an angler or knows of anglers and wants to, or has pictures of skate as well, then there's the skate spotter for you to submit your data to. And what's come about recently, which was missing from the citizen science perspective in Scotland, is a Scotland-wide group where information about Scottish sharks and skates can be fed into from all people from all walks and backgrounds. So having a social media based recording there available for anyone who has any information whatsoever on sharks and skates in Scottish waters. So it meant that people were being able to go out, see something, and then put a sighting and go, oh, what was this? And then you can get information fed and have answers from that information. So not just looking at the egg cases, looking at washed up individuals, looking at in situ, like divers and snorkelers that might have seen something, any information whatsoever, pooling all this knowledge into one place. So in order to kind of get an idea of where all these sightings are coming from throughout the whole of Scotland, but in doing so, you're getting that information from a big diverse background of people, from people who are out there actively going out looking for skates and for egg cases, to those that just happen chance upon something and just like looking, is there someone looking at this in Scotland, kind of thing. So it's then going to produce that. It's not online at the moment, but they're working towards this interactive map that's showing all the populations essentially and distributions of these animals and where these sightings are coming from and all the different sources and different types of sightings they are as well. And what they're also doing is they're kind of getting people together and getting them to submit information and also teach them, show them how to go about and conduct surveys and how to collect data in an ethical way as well, and going out and talking to communities and talking to groups and people and actually getting people enthused and understanding what the things are that they're seeing. So that these social media based platforms actually really is one of the benefits of social media, I find, is for citizen science and for like bringing people together and actually showing you what there is on your doorstep, because the word gets out and then more and more people get involved, and actually you find people that go, oh yeah, I didn't even know what that was, but I saw one of those last week, and I took a picture, there you go. And it's just, and it's just starting a conversation, and it's getting people interested and involved in what's going on around them and what they're seeing, which is really good. So moving now from sharks and skates onto marine mammals, no surprising, there's a lot, again, so many marine mammal citizen science projects around the UK and particularly around Scotland. Much the same issues that sharks have. We've got environmental pollution. We've got more use of the marine environment, which is putting more noise into the marine environment in general. And this all has a cumulative impact on the animals that live there and use it for feeding, for communicating, for mating. So we really need to understand what impact we're having on them. So the more sightings information that we get, we actually identify places where maybe we've seen them in the past and we're not seeing them anymore, or we're seeing new sightings in places that there weren't before. And the question then you can ask is why? What's changed that's gone from there being none or being some to being lots to being none, kind of thing. So it's only by collecting this sightings data, this this on the ground grassroots information that you can actually go out and start to answer these questions and actually find out why these things are happening. So Scotland's really important for many marine mammals, and we're talking whales, we're talking dolphins, porpoise, seals. We have one of the largest colonies of grey and common seals in the UK and essentially in European waters around Scotland. And these habitats are really important for them. Our diverse coastlines, our island chains, the way that our currents feed through, and the types of prey species that we get in there are really important for the feeding and the breeding areas, and kind of the changes that we're seeing in these places could essentially be things that are occurring further down the food chain, or something else that's happening that's preventing or improving. So the fact that we've got such a diverse area means that there's lots of potential habitat for these animals to live in and to thrive in, and we want to make sure that we're giving effective protection, and that we're the shared space that we're using, that we're keeping it at a level that is effectively maintaining and improving these populations. So again, the citizen science for marine mammals, anyone can get involved in this, and especially you don't need to be a diver, don't even need to be a snorkeler for this. You just need to have, enjoy going outside. In fact, you don't even need to go outside, because some of these groups, they'll actually need people to go and look at images and try and match up photo identification. I picked these photos especially of these bottlenose dolphins that Steve Treluk kindly donated to me today, because what they show is that you can see that there's scar patterns, there's individual features on these animals that are really important for trying to identify features that distinguish them from others. So you can start to build up a catalogue of information and work out which, are you seeing the same individual? How many of them are coming in? What groups are they coming together? You got in big pods, you can work out a lot of information by analysing photo footage. So you could be the person going out there taking the pictures, you could be the person analysing the pictures. So it's a lot of different ways in which you can get involved. But essentially, if you're going out there, all you really need is a pair of shoes and an ID guide to get an idea of what you're looking at. And binoculars helps. But there's lots of information out there on how to get involved, how to start IDing and going out collecting information on marine mammals. So I'm going to talk about kind of individual ones, and then I've got a huge slide at the end, because I could have talked about this all night, because there are so many different groups out there all doing amazing work to try and pool knowledge into what marine mammals are doing around our waters. And I wanted to start with the British Divers Marine Life Rescue, because they're a really important group that essentially you're doing citizen science in the effect that they're training volunteers to go out and help assist with live strandings of marine mammals around the UK, around Scottish coastline. And without these little networks of people in their areas, they really would struggle to work out information. And any, even you get a lot of successful floating of animals and getting them back out to sea, but any information that you gather, any information that comes in from the general public that they've seen a stranding, or there's an animal that doesn't look happy, and you then send your BDMLR marine mammal medics out there to go and assess and make sure the animals are okay. And these people, that take time out of their day to actually just go and sit by the shoreline on rotation, waiting, to make sure that these animals get out safely. And that, I think, is a huge citizen science network, because without that, those people going out there and spending their time and volunteering their time into that, then you wouldn't have all these kind of you wouldn't know what was going on around our coastline, particularly because Scotland is so, its coastline is so convoluted. You're not necessarily got someone everywhere. You've got miles and miles of coastline where there's nobody about. You might just have one person that is around and things like that. So if they can relay, if someone spots something and can relay a message to someone else, then you can actually get people out there on the ground and actually work out what's going on. And they've been established since 1988. And there's a big social media based monitoring network as well, that once you're part of the BDMLR, you can go and help out on a variety of different live strandings that occur. Sometimes it's even doing relays of seals to seal hospitals and things like that. So it's a really big way in which you can help if that's what your interest is in, because then that can feed on and get you interested in other aspects of things to do in marine science and conservation. So it's a really good organisation. If you haven't heard of it, it's well worth looking into. And if it's something that you like doing and being outdoors and that, it's really good. On the west coast of Scotland, we have the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust based on Mull. Now, they've been established since 1982. They've got an extensive photo ID catalogue of marine mammals on the west coast of Scotland, in particular bottlenose dolphins, minke whales, and the west coast community of Orca, which are now sadly dwindling to as 8 individuals. However, only 2 are regularly sighted. John Coe, the man himself, very distinguishable with his notched fin on the right-hand side of my screen there, is generally seen with another male orca, Aquarius. And they've got a really, I won't go into too much detail, but if you're interested in orca and you don't know much about the West Coast pod, I'd definitely have you listen, go and read more about them, because it is a sad story, and it really just shows kind of what impacts we can have on, what negative impact we actually have on cetaceans, on these top apex predators, and why it's really important that we collect this data. But they also have this fantastic app called Whale Track, which you can use. So if you can report single sightings, or you can, if you're on a boat for a number of hours, you can report a whole excursion that you're out, and then you can keep adding whenever you spot something along that track, and then that information that gets fed into the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust, and then they're able to see that information, get an idea of what the populations are doing on the west coast. So it's a really good app, and you can also go on their website, and there's a lot of information on there of how to get involved with them as well. Back up in Orkney, you've got the Orkney Marine Mammal Research Institute, and again, much like the Skate Trust, this is a community-run project where they're trying to establish what the populations of marine mammals that are in the Orkney waters throughout the year, and also the seasonal visitors. Without that, you wouldn't see the amazing orca photos and videos that come through of how these animals are interacting throughout the year, and how they move between Orkney and Shetland and the north coast of Scotland, and then also how they then move off over to Iceland. It's quite an amazing feat to actually see all this data and look at kind of what these animals are doing. And without submitting this information, if you're about and you spot something, or if you're out and about and you're looking around and you think, oh, how do I show some, who do I report that information to? Then there's loads of places on their website of how to report a sighting, and also information on sightings reports, what's been seen different months of the year, and where that they'll get the data in, and you might not get a monthly recap of what's going on, but then by the end of the year you get a good idea of what those animals have done and how they've moved around the islands throughout that year. It's quite incredible to actually, all that information has just come from citizen scientists, just people with an interest walking along the coastline have gone, getting good photographs that are able to ID these animals, and then work out which pods they are that are coming to the waters. They've also got a request for any Risso's dolphin pictures, good quality pictures of Risso's dolphins that they can add to their photo catalogue as well. So there's ways in which you can add information into that as well if you're up here on your holidays, as I am. Typically you get a lot of sightings in summer, but do your sightings come from there being less animals, or just because there's less people about? So it's kind of interesting if you're looking throughout the year, if you come at different times of year, just because you're looking and you say, oh, well, there's not been many sightings, there can't be that much there, actually is there. So, you could be adding a record that shows that the animals there all year round, we just didn't know about it because the numbers of people looking aren't there to do it. So every sighting, every record is really important. Did I click that? Being slow. So when I said that I was going to go through all these projects, and then there's a whole list of other groups out there that are doing amazing work around Scotland. There's the Seawatch Foundation, which has the Cetacean Sightings Network, which is a Scotland-wide social media-based recording scheme. Seawatch actually teaches skills in ID. You can do courses. They have a yearly event called Orca Watch, which runs off the Caithness coast, so you can get involved in, and there's information on their website of the 2022, which should be running, hopefully, fingers crossed, this year. And it's a great way to get like-minded people at an event together with lots of, people who are experts and amateur experts and citizen scientists and everyone who really loves and likes getting involved in orca research and conservation. Everyone, like, it's a really good event. And there's lots of information on their Facebook group and on their website about it. On the east coast of Scotland is more, you've got the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Trust, and they run their shore watch, and there's ways in which you can submit data into them as well. There's the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme. So if this is now for dead animals that have washed ashore, actually collecting, citizen scientists going in, seeing something washed up on a beach and knowing who to contact, get information from the animal, because there's a lot of information you can actually get from a deceased animal as to why it is there in the first place and what's caused that problem. So they've been running now for nearly 2 decades. They have a lot of research. They have a lot of collaborators throughout the whole world in which they share the results of these kind of post-mortem information. But without the citizen scientists, without you people on the ground going out and seeing this stuff and reporting it, that is where they get the data from. So really, really important. The backbone of it is the people going out there and seeing these things, and not necessarily the people going out there and then working on this stuff. So, people on the ground are really, really important. Now there's huge resources out there. Like, if we talk about photo ID, there is a fantastic Orca ID catalogue that has been updated for 2021, which you can download from the just type in Scottish killer whale photo ID catalogue and it will come up. But the guys who've worked on this kind of take all this, all information from orca that have been within Scottish waters throughout the year, and they're working out like kind of which pods come together, which animals are the same groups, and using IDing features from these animals to try and build this catalogue of animals that have been in Scottish waters, that are frequent in Scottish waters throughout this time, and also match them with where they've come from. Where are they when they're not in Scotland? It's having a catalogue like this with good photos that enables you to go out and put that science in there, put that research in. So anyone can go and submit in data. And if you've got the catalogue, there's the list. The guys who've done it, 2 Andrews and Hugh and Karen and Steve, they pull this together. But they also rely a lot on people submitting information on that. So that's a really good resource, and I'd strongly suggest anyone download that, because it's so interesting to actually see it, all these different groups, all these groups of orca that actually come to Scottish waters that you wouldn't actually think about. And I just can't really not talk about all the local sightings groups that you can go on to for on Facebook, on social media. A lot of them, they have Instagram pages, they have Twitter pages, they're all kind of connected in some ways and work together. And there's, wherever you live in the UK, you'll have groups like this out there. It's just a case of trying to find them on your Facebook feeds. But I've listed some of the main ones that we have around Scotland, because they all work together and provide data and kind of work as a team, work as a network throughout the whole of Scotland. And it really is a case of people who live or have gone to those areas on holiday and have provided that information. They've seen something, and everything just builds this network and this information that can feed into it. So that's kind of, it's not everything. And there's things like beach cleans. There's the Marine Conservation Society. They do a lot of work surface against sewage. You can help them. There's lots of different organisations out there that are collecting data and feeding into research and making a big impact. But what I wanted to do was, it's all very well showing you that there's all this stuff to do, but what actually happens with data? What does that even do in the long term? So I thought I just got 2 quick little case studies here of things that that it's been beneficial for. So I talked earlier about the flapper skate and how that there's all this different research going, all this citizen science research going on to protect like this one species of skate, and a critically endangered animal. Basically, there was a marine protected area for flapper skate designated back in 2014 on the west coast of Scotland, and it's huge. It's 741 kilometres, and it spans all the way from the Loch through the Sound of Mull down to the Sound of Jura, and you can see this whole area. The blue box is essentially the whole area, and it's also got big restrictions in fishing in there, so that you're not allowed to fish because the issue is that any bycatch of these animals is you can't legally land a flapper skate in Scotland, but you want to minimise potential bycatch of the animal through fisheries. So there's a lot of protective measures put in place in this area to prevent that from happening, which you can see from the hashed box. Now, until recently, this was the largest marine protected area in Scotland for anelasmobranch, so shark skate ray in Scotland waters. There has recently been the Seas of the Outer Hebrides, which is a huge marine protected area that's out Coll and Tiree Way, which also protects basking sharks as well as minke whales. But until that, this was actually quite a big deal to have such a massive marine protected area for an animal that is essentially highly migratory, but just happens to be residential and doing well, still having a stronghold in this area. And what's really amazing as well about this marine protected area is that it wasn't proposed by managers because of research that went on. It was actually proposed by sea anglers because they were going out and doing commercial angling catch and release. You can't land them, and they were noticing that they were catching individuals, and that they were potentially catching the same individuals, and that they could see that there was this huge residential area that they were always going to be here, and it seemed to be a really important place for them. So they basically proposed this marine protected area, and it got granted. And this was largely the boundaries of this marine protected area are largely due to the information that those sea anglers have collected. And since then, the anglers are really pro for this marine protected area and for the management that's in place, and also kind of the research and the monitoring work that's going into, because the researchers are working with the anglers. They're not being excluded. They're effectively kind of going in and working alongside, being taught techniques in which they can best handle, best practice, that they can go in and assist the researchers collect data. They've been taught techniques in using the tools that they use to any individuals that are tagged. They can check if these skate are tagged and upload that information to kind of get movement and tracking information on them. And that Skate Spotter app that I mentioned previously was actually brought about from this, because you're getting, or if you essentially have the angling boat themselves collecting information, but then you have the individual anglers that are out there. They might not be on a commercial boat that is feeding into this information, but what they can then do is that picture that they have of their amazing capture that day, they can then provide that image towards the research. So the kind of building knowledge base on the animal. And like I say, the fact that you can start to identify individuals from their spot pattern as being unique, it means that then you can see how often the animals are getting brought up, where they're moving, where they're being found. So you could get one that has been brought up in the north and then in the south, and you're actually saying that it's moving around a lot. Or you could get one that just gets brought to the same place. So it's really important information on individuals. And what it's also led to is that this marine protected area and the management that's gone into it is being seen as a framework for good practice and for wider skate research out of Scotland and into Northern Ireland and other places that are now going into looking at where skate are actually moving to and what they're doing. And so it's proving a really effective way of combining management, conservation, and citizen science, and seeing in less than 10 years the amount of data that's come out of that you can actually then use to benefit this species. And another one I'm just going to touch briefly on is, so there's a humpback whale. I love this story. There's the Scottish Humpback ID and Fourth Cetacean Sightings group as well, which is where I got these pictures from. Now there was the BSAC Scotland lot back in 2020 had this amazing feeding activity off Coll, and there was a humpback whale that they took really good pictures of. So they had the fluke, and they also had the tail fluke. And what they were able, so the dorsal on the left, and then the fluke, which is the tail fin, on the right. And what they were able to do is they got some really good clear photos, and the guys that were on the trip with them, and then that information got sent into the Scottish Humpback group. And then a year later, in January, a humpback whale popped up in the Firth of Forth, and from the pictures, as you can see on the right, you can see how they've used the photo ID to match up the fluke to be able to. Humpbacks have got very distinctive features that allow you to identify them, and you get like little scarrings and colorations in there, and you're able to like ID individuals. And what they're able to see is that within that time frame, this individual, who was nicknamed Barney because he's got a very big barnacle on the dorsal, basically went around Scotland over that period, and popped up on the other side. So what's great is then you can carry on looking for this individual and kind of work out what its movements are and see how often and where it's popping up. And the more people that know about it, more people that actually go, oh, there is stuff in there. Like, let's go down to the beach and see what's there. And at the minute, there's a humpback in the Forth. I'm not quite sure if it's Barney, but there's a lot of sightings at the minute, which is really exciting. There's loads of videos going up right now. So I get onto their website. There's some really good, interesting work going on, and then you get to see what citizen science is being done on all of the sightings that are being seen at the moment from it. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, as much citizen science as I can chuck into this time frame. Apologies, I've gone over, but yeah,